How's it going there, guys? Dave Nader here, and today I have another movie review for you. And the movie that I'm reviewing today is Wonder Woman, which I just got back from seeing, and this movie follows Guess Who? And the movie starts out with Wonder Woman, or Diana, on an island, which is where the Amazonian women hide away from the rest of the world, and you get to see a bit of her backstory and as she grows up. And I thought that was a fairly decent way to show her training, just get that out of the way fairly quickly in the beginning of the movie rather than having the origin story pad out throughout the whole movie. I mean, yes, this movie is a Wonder Woman origin story like all the way through, but like, you know, she gets to the kicking butt like fairly quickly, unlike, you know, some origin stories where it's halfway through and then they become the superhero. Anyway, so this movie starts out with her there just kind of doing her thing, training a little bit in spite of her mother's best wishes. And then all of a sudden Chris Pine shows up miraculously on their island one day, and Diana learns of the fact that there is a big war, the Great War, World War I, going on in the rest of the world, and she decides to go off and help him, you know, fight some battles and try to win the war. And that's really all I'm going to get into, at least for now, in terms of plot. And I want to say that I really liked this movie. It was actually a very good movie. I think it's, besides Man of Steel, which I admit is still my favorite DCEU movie, despite the fact that still a lot of people don't like that movie. I'm not going to get into that for now. Aside from that, this is my favorite DCEU film so far, and largely just because of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. She's fantastic in this movie. She is so likable, like ridiculously likable in this movie. She's, you know, it's humorous seeing her be kind of just unaware and a little bit perplexed of the way the world works once she leaves her homeland. She goes out in the rest of the world with Chris Pine and, you know, the eventual ragtag group that she joins. And, you know, that type of stuff has been done in plenty of movies, let alone superhero movies, but it's especially well done here. There's a lot of really good humor involved, you know, her just like being kind of confused by certain customs and all kinds of things like that. Like even the cliched jokes like, okay, yes, she's a woman who's been living with women for her entire life, so she's never seen a man. And then Chris Pine shows up. Obviously, you're going to get the sexual innuendos and jokes there, but even that is done like really well. I was laughing out loud. Like there's a scene on the boat. The dialogue was legitimately great. It was actually kind of hilarious, and it's like that throughout the whole movie. This movie actually has a lot of great banter and dialogue, especially involving Wonder Woman. But she's also just a very endearing character. She's very likable and definitely very heroic. She's a badass in this movie when she actually starts throwing down. And I also like that this movie kind of took its time before getting into like the really big action, because yes, there is action in the first half of the movie, but like it doesn't get into like the big set pieces too much until about halfway through. And like, because it kind of waits a little bit, the movie takes its time. It's a lot more powerful when it hits. And I loved it. Like, say what you will about Batman v Superman, but Wonder Woman's theme in that movie was really good. At least I think so. And it's actually used very sparingly here, but when it shows up, just perfectly utilized, really. It was just really badass, and it fit with her badassery and character. And Gal Gadot gives a terrific performance in this movie, very likable, well-written character. And without giving things away, because, you know, like any good reviewer, I try not to give spoilers unless it's a spoiler-filled review, which I give warnings for. I'm not going to give anything away, but the way her expectations are subverted in certain ways, and, you know, the way she expects the world to work, the way things should be, and that not really meeting up with the reality of things. And not just because, you know, I already mentioned there's the jokes like she's not used to these people's customs, so there's humor there. I'm not talking about that, just you'll see what I mean in the movie. I thought that was actually really well done, and it shows up throughout the entire movie. She's a very idealistic person, and she expects things to go this way, and she has a goal in her mind, and, you know, maybe things aren't going to work out the way she assumes them to work out that way. All the actors in this movie did a very good job. Chris Pine is very likable in this movie as well, and, you know, aside from a couple performances, you know, like in, you know, This Means War, that's a pretty boring movie, but, you know, aside from just a handful of performances here and there to where his, you know, kind of just charming character that he plays all the time just kind of got a bit old, like, I'll admit that he plays the same type of charming character fairly often, but for some reason it just works on me. I just can't help but really enjoy his characters in movies, and they tend to be very similar. But in this movie, it also really works. He has plenty of good banter, and the movie did a great job of making me really care about his relationship that he develops with Wonder Woman. And all the other characters in their group are very good. I'm not going to elaborate too much on them. I think you should see the movie for yourself. And like, I can't think of like any jokes in this movie that felt out of place, because the movie definitely has some grit to it. It gets kind of dark at times. The villainous bad guys do some really bad things that villainous bad guys do, as you would expect them to do, because, you know, it's a World War I movie. You're going to expect to see some, you know, really evil, nasty villains. And yeah, you get that, but at the same time, the humor is mixed in really well. It actually fits with the tone. The movie's fun, but it's pretty serious when it needs to be. And yeah, so like, plenty of characters in this movie are really likable and charming and funny, but they actually fit into the story. And as for villains, Danny Huston, I believe his name is, you know, he's awesome in another superhero movie, X-Men Origins Wolverine. And yeah, that's, you know, like most people, I don't like that movie very much, but honestly, I think he did actually about as good of a job in that movie as he could have. I think he did a pretty decent job. And when I did like the movie when I was younger, I really liked him as the villain. I thought he was pretty good. And he was just absolutely flat out amazing in 30 Days of Night. Like, I'm not going to talk about that anymore because I might want to review that movie at some point. But yeah, so I was excited to see that he was in this movie because I stayed away from trailers. When he showed up, I was like, oh, that guy. And this is where I get into a little bit of flaws. Like, he's not a bad villain. He's effectively, you know, evil. You don't like him. He's not a bad villain. I enjoyed him. But or he's not like a mad scientist, but he comes off very mad scientist-y. It comes off as a bit too cheesy for my taste at times. And yes, it's a superhero film. You expect to see over-the-top villains. But there are times to where he just didn't quite fit in with the tone a little bit. Like, there's some really dark, depressing stuff that happens, and he's oftentimes, or pretty much always, the one, you know, setting this type of stuff in motion. But he's just, you know, he's that type of villain. He's just a bit too cheesy. But he did a good job in the acting department, and mainly just a certain thing. This isn't really a spoiler. Like, he develops a ssort of relationship with a chemical. That's all I'll say. And that was just kind of dumb. I didn't like that incorporation. I was just like, really? Like, the movie, it lost me for a second there. I was like, dang, it's like, I get this is a world where magic exists, but these are supposed to be like the normal human people. And so the fact that we're getting into like just really straight up science fiction-y territory there, that's kind of weird. But anyways, enough about that. Just the vast majority of the time, the characters are done very well in this movie, and I'm not really going to talk anything else about other villains in the movie, but the movie does a good job in that department. The movie has very good action sequences too, and I said that the movie doesn't get into too much action until the second half of the movie, and it's really good. Like, you know, I hesitate to say great just because there have been other movies in the DCEU that I thought, better action sequences, but that's not really fair to just compare them, because, you know, these action sequences, they do hold up on their own. I mean, when Wonder Woman's kicking ass, it's just great. It's really well choreographed. The camera work is pretty steady most of the time. I mean, there's a little bit of shaky cam here and there, but it's very comprehensible. It's actually, like, good. And it's not, the vast majority of the time, it's not shaky cam. And there's good use of wire work. The CGI and green screen was mostly well implemented, except for the scenes near the beginning of the movie, which is on like the Amazonian island. There were times to where there was a little bit of fighting going down there, and the CGI and the green screen was just, I think it was just the bright, you know, beach-esque lighting. But however, when they get into the World War I setting, it's more dark and dimly lit. And it helps kind of mask the CGI a bit better, and it works. And there's also good, just, you know, in-camera stunt choreography as well. This is a well-paced movie. It's very entertaining throughout, and again, it's funny and lighthearted, but it's dark and gritty in all the right places when it needs to be. It doesn't overdo it in any way. It's actually a fairly well-balanced movie with great characters, very good action. It's a well-shot movie. You know, in the direction department, the movie didn't blow me away or anything. I mean, again, I don't want to just keep on comparing it to other movies, but I mean, you know, again, say what you will about the Zack Snyder DCEU movies, but they all look really good. I think that's kind of hard to deny. Although some people would deny that, but whatever. Zack Snyder makes amazing looking movies, so it didn't really hold up to that visual style, and it also didn't hold up to the visual style of Suicide Squad. But that movie, you know, is a whole other thing on its own. It's very stylized, but still, this is a good-looking movie. And also the music, kind of funny. Not funny, but just something I noticed. There are a few times to where the music in this movie kind of reminded me of Narnia. Just like little hints of something I was like, huh, you know, that kind of reminds me of Narnia. And the music in this movie is done by Rupert Gregson-Williams. And I actually didn't even research it, so maybe that's just a fluke and that person's not related to Harry Gregson-Williams who did the music for Narnia. But I'm sure they are. I'm not sure if he's a son or maybe a sibling, but yeah, I mean, I guess someone was influencing someone else, because I actually, like, there were times where I literally, like, got little hints of, like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Narnia, and then I was like, oh, Rupert Gregson-Williams, that's interesting. So yeah, just a little thing right there. The music is mostly good, but the best parts in terms of music is when Wonder Woman's theme just pops up. Oh my gosh, it's so good, and it's better utilized in this movie than it was in Batman v Superman, and it's also utilized fairly minimally, which made it even better when it finally showed up. And I would definitely recommend this movie to you guys. And also, real quick, this is just one little thing that I want to mention in terms of this movie setting up, like, you know, good villains and setting up, like, wow, these guys are bad. Because I did bag on Danny Huston a little bit as a villain, but mostly I think he was well done. He was at least entertaining. But yeah, I'm going to give you like a thumbs up when the spoilers are over, but this is going to be over in like 10-15 seconds. So yeah, 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So the scene to where Danny Huston locks those guys, those German officials in the room, and, you know, puts the gas in there with them, and then he throws the gas mask in there with them, and the person he's with is like, wait a minute, like, you know, the gas mask isn't even going to help. He's like, yeah, but they don't know that. I was like, oh man, that is a complete nutter dick move. That's bad. That's kind of great, though. Anyways, okay, spoilers over, spoilers over. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that. That's not really even a relevant detail. That was a little thing. I was like, oh, that was actually kind of great. A little moment there. That was pretty bad. But yeah, I definitely recommend this movie, and I'm going to give this movie a B+. And guys, if you like this video, please rate and comment and subscribe. And if you want to, you can also share. Goodbye, guys.